In our previous episode, Lin encountered the former goddess of life and finally learned the truth behind the corpse realm. She then transferred all her remaining energy to form an artificial life core and handed it over to our boy as a gift. Later on, the pair rushed to the exit only to stumble upon terrifying creatures, and just when things couldn't look worse, someone came to the rescue. Initially, our boy thought the man was protecting him but quickly realized that wasn't the case. Rather, the man was protecting humanity itself. What shocked our boy the most was the fact even in death, even as a walking corpse, the man's will hadn't faded. What had once been belief had hardened into obsession. Another monster lunged forward, but the man didn't hesitate. He raised his sword and split the creature clean in two. However, the monsters just kept coming, and he kept cutting them down. Then Yao turned, quickly remarking that it was almost ready. But things were only escalating. More monsters emerged, and it became painfully clear to Lin that they were all coming for his Genesis scepter. Just as the monsters rushed toward him, more humans appeared and charged into the fray, clashing head-on with the dragons and abyssal corpses. The human side was clearly outnumbered, but they stood their ground. Our boy stood frozen, stunned by the sight of them wielding all sorts of weapons protecting them. He quietly remarked that these were the ancestors of the human race, heroes whose conviction had outlived their flesh, their time, even death itself. All that remained was their unwavering will to defend humanity. Finally, the magic array opened, and Yao's voice called out saying that it was done and they could now leave the corpse realm. Lin turned one last time, watching those brave souls locked in battle. He remembered the goddess of life had declared he would have his answer once he reached Supreme Divine. Quietly, he made a silent promise that if the day ever came, he would return here and bring them back to life. Yao noticed he wasn't moving and anxiously tugged his arm. Together, they stepped into the teleportation array. What followed was a flash of light enveloping them, and just like that, they disappeared. Back in the royal palace, the formation suddenly erupted with brilliant light, and the array of spirits swiftly announced that humans were now returning from the corpse realm. Meng Anwen appeared almost instantly, followed by the other three. They were surprised to see Lord An getting here so quickly and immediately greeted him, but he ignored them and asked the array spirit, demanding to know who had come through the teleportation array. The array spirit responded saying it was a man and a woman, then immediately projected the live feed. Sure enough, it was Yao and Lin. The old emperor gasped and called out his daughter's name. Only then did Meng Anwen finally breathe a sigh of relief, clearly relieved that our boy was safe. He then cast a sideways glance at the royals behind him and remarked that they got lucky this time, adding that their entire lineage had narrowly escaped disaster. Without wasting another moment, he announced that he would now remove the divine tower from the palace. The three of them didn't know what to say, but their faces still carried the look of someone who just escaped death. With that, Meng Anwen teleported away, and in the blink of an eye, the divine tower that had loomed over the palace and the oppressive killing aura that had lasted for more than a month vanished. 5 minutes later, the teleportation was finally complete. Yao stumbled forward and cried out for her father before throwing herself into the emperor's arms. Tears streamed down her face as she confessed she thought she'd never see him again. The old emperor gently patted her back, comforting her with the reassurance that everything was all right now. Our boy didn't have time to watch the emotional reunion. Instead, he stated bluntly that this time, the royal family owed him an explanation. It was Grandpa Li who responded first, explaining that, of course, Lin would get an explanation. And not just that, there would be proper compensation as well. He asserted that the responsibility lay with their family and told our boy to rest assured. Lin didn't push further, and he simply nodded. That's when the other guy hurriedly added that Lin's sister had been waiting for him for a month and asked if he'd like to see her. Lin was surprised to hear that and immediately asked where she was. Grandpa Li offered to personally take him, saying she was in the palace, but Lin had already summoned his wings. He waved the offer off, saying he just needed the location, and in the next moment, he was gone. It didn't take long before he spotted her, and as Mohan turned, her eyes widened in surprise as Lin gently landed. Our boy called out to her. Meanwhile, Mohan beamed with joy, pulled him into a hug, and said she knew he'd be fine. Lin helped wipe her tears and softly replied that of course he was fine, but asked how she even knew he was trapped in the corpse realm. Mohan said she didn't know anything about that place specifically. It was her teacher who sensed danger around him and told her to come check on him. Then she revealed that after knowing what happened, our boy's teachers nearly tore the royal family apart. Lin scratched his head and said he hadn't expected his teachers to find out. As she looked at her little bro, Mohan couldn't help but think he was already strong enough, and with teachers like those behind him, maybe it was finally time she stopped worrying so much. Mohan felt relieved just seeing our boy safe, and she suggested he go check in with his teachers, saying surely they were all worried sick by now. Then our boy asked about her plans. She replied that for herself she had to get back to leveling up, and further explained that after guarding this place for an entire month, she remarked that her teacher was probably furious by now. She smiled at Lin, waved goodbye, and then left. Meanwhile, Lin chuckled while thinking to himself that Mohan's teacher was indeed strict. Meanwhile, Yao was recounting everything that had happened in the corpse realm. The old emperor, after hearing the story, remarked that it was thanks to Lin that his daughter even made it out alive. Grandpa Li chimed in as well, praising Lin's composure, saying it was something far beyond what most people could manage. He went on to explain that not only did Lin survive the corpse realm, but he'd even managed to obtain a really rare opportunity, something even people like them might not have pulled off unscathed. The emperor nodded in agreement, then told Yao to rest for a few days. After that, he said, they'd go see Lin together. Once his sister had left, Lin returned to the courtyard where all three of his teachers were already waiting. One by one, he answered their questions and even poured them tea himself. Yan, after hearing everything, realized the goddess of life had entrusted Lin with the Genesis scepter. He remarked that if Lin could also locate the real life core, then his chances of reaching Supreme Divine would rise significantly. But Meng Anwen had a different view, and he argued that this might not be entirely a good thing, as he believed that although external items were useful, but shouldn't be overly rely on them. White Divine chuckled at that and pointed out that someone who owned the Divine Tower was probably the last person qualified to say that. Still, he agrees with the sentiment and tells Lin that in the end, the only thing truly worth relying on is his strength. Lin reassured them, saying he wasn't planning to depend on external items. Despite having tons of questions himself, beneath it all, there's one question that he had to get off his chest. So he asked if it was possible for someone to be brought back to life after death.